Hey guys, what's going on? It's Solar, and today we're going to be having a look at the usefulness of nulls. So you've probably seen me using nulls here, there and everywhere in some of the lessons, and they're just really quick tools to bring up. They don't render, they're basically invisible objects and just super useful. So I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of the time that I would use nulls. So first thing we got to remember is that our nulls we can use our nulls to hold our tracking data, which you will have seen when I was doing the tracking tutorial. So once you've tracked your footage, I've obviously deleted it from this one apparently, but you know, once you've tracked your footage in 2D and you go to apply the let's bring this up here. So if we go to we're gonna have to use a tracker, so let's just see what that is. It's not on here. So window and tracker, and we are going to select this. No, that would be the boat. But yeah, when you come to do a track motion and you do a quick track on something, so let's try and track one of these trees up here. So if we're doing a 2D track, and what I'm going to do is just track forward, and I'm going to assume that's done a pretty good job. Yeah, you know, up until the point where it left the frame, it's done a pretty good job. And now we're going to have a look here, come back to the first frame that we tracked, which is there, and we're going to track backwards as well. So we've got a full track from back to front here. So what you do is you make a layer, you make a new null, and then as we've discussed, you select your target, which would be here frame 11 null, and then you apply the X and Y coordinates, and then up here we have a null which has our tracking information. So like I said, a null, if you come into its options, you can actually change the scale and the height of it, so you can make these things massive or tiny. And if you've watched the 3D tracking, you'll see that it tries to make bigger and smaller ones depending on how far you are. But essentially this doesn't matter, you know, this can be as big or small as you want. You can change the colors in here by changing the labels, but essentially, yeah, it is just a holder for information. But what can we do in terms of its usefulness? So I'm going to not make a comp that big. I'm going to make it half the size. And let's assume we have our, let's see, do I still have the bouncing ball? I don't have a ball in here, but I'm going to make a circle. So if I drag this down, make a circle. So let's just assume I'm going to make real quick a ball bouncing animation. So you've seen me do this a million times already, and this version is going to be no different, probably a bit less accurate. And let's go up to here. Now we're going to make. I've just realized I can't use my shortcuts on this because my capture program has actually stolen my shortcuts. So kind of annoying, I'm having to do all this manually. So let's just do a loop out on this. Bring this open, position, property. You've seen me do this already, so there we go. Come back out of here, loop out, and we're going to do ping pong, keyframes 2, and there we go. Okay, so we got the ball bouncing as we did before, and let's assume that we're kind of happy with how this works. So there we go, we've got our ball bouncing, kind of happy with this. Now the problem is, if I want to move this animation, what if I want it to be bouncing over here? Well, I could essentially like try, there's a couple of ways I can do this, right? So if you select your keyframes, so make sure you're highlighted over one keyframe, you can push that down and kind of move this, and then we've not broken our animation because it's still going. But what happens is, if you click the property, it selects all the keyframes, and then as long as you're in line with one, you can kind of move this animation, and it'll work. Now that's one way to do it. The other way to do this would be to make a null. So if I make a null, and I parent this animation to our null, we've got the advantage of being able to do to animate our null. So how will this work? So obviously what I'm doing here is using this as a parent, and then I can just basically keyframe this from like one side to another. And because we're using the left and right information from the null and not the shape layer, we can have this animation. It's basically a way of layering your animation. So we've got that bounce animation going on here, and because of this null moving left to right, we can then add, you know, a completely different level of animation, and super useful to kind of remember. So if there we go. So if I press this and play it, we've got our ball going left to right, and this is all done through two animations, one up and down, and then just 3 keyframes for this. So that's one use. You can use a null to kind of drive the to add an extra layer on animation. Now another use for the null would be to let's say I'm like, oh, I really like the bouncing ball animation, but right now it's just too big. The ball's too big. So what I can do here is I can scale down my null, and so if we come back, that's what it was before, and if I just nudge my null up here, what I'm going to do is scale this down, and then I can also reposition my animation as well by moving my null. Now let's see what happens. And there we go, suddenly we've scaled our animation. And again, this is all happening because all this is just inheriting what we're doing it, because we've parented it, and because it doesn't really matter what size the null is because it's invisible. You can go ahead and just kind of animate this, let's say back to 100, which is what it was. In terms of position, we start here, but you know, maybe we want to finish, let's just come down to bottom frame there, so we're going to want to finish about that high, and let's just say this far right. So again, different type of animation, but let's come down. Okay, so this is as far down as it gets. So then I can just move that up, and then we know for a fact that this is so there you go. So we've got the ball now scaling up and moving along, and again this has all been done through 2 keyframes on our null. So it's just useful to know that the null, and you know, say I like this, and I can then, you know, add this null to another null, and I can just maybe add a rotation to this one. So I really like what the animation's doing, but I just want to spin it on its head. And so now obviously the problem is it's not really going up the side of the screen now, but again I would just have to work out the maths behind this. So super useful. So nulls can basically hold data. That's one thing they can do, tracking data, all that kind of stuff. You can use them to add an extra layer of animation, as we saw earlier, so the left and right movement to the bouncing ball. And then the final use for them is to kind of once you've got an animation set, you can just basically use them to reposition or move your animation around. So just a quick lesson today, maybe just a nice little break from all the kind of hardcore lessons we've been doing recently with all the tracking and that. But yeah, just definitely get acquainted with Nulls.